I found Uriah reading a great fat book with such demonstrative attention that his lank forefinger followed up every line as he read and made clammy tracks along the page like a snail.
I observed that his nostrils, which were thin and pointed with sharp dints in them, had a singular and most uncomfortable way of expanding and contracting themselves, that they seemed to twinkle instead of his eyes, which hardly ever twinkled at all.
It was no fancy of mine about his hands, I observed, for he frequently ground the palms together against each other as if to squeeze them dry and warm, besides often wiping them in a stealthy way on his pocket handkerchief.
Uriah, with his long hands slowly twining over one another, made a ghastly writhe from waist upwards to express his concurrence in this estimation of me.
When a plunge is to be made into the water, it's of no use lingering on the bank.
I shall not weary you with good advice.
What other changes have come upon me besides the changes in my growth and looks and in the knowledge I have garnered all the while? This while I wear a gold watch and chain, a ring upon my little finger, and a long-tailed coat, and I use a great deal of bear's grease, which, taken in conjunction with the ring, looks bad, or like he's a pimp.
I feel as if they might go walking to and fro forever, and the world might somehow be the better for it.
Why do I secretly give Miss Shepherd 12 Brazil nuts for a present, I wonder?
In fact, said Mrs. Micawber, lowering her voice, this is between ourselves. Our reception was cool.
Egad, Doctor, returned Mr. Wickfield, if Dr. Watts knew mankind, he might have written with as much truth, Satan finds much mischief still for busy hands to do.
She was a little sharp-eyed woman who used to wear, when she was dressed, one unchangeable cap ornamented with some artificial flowers and two artificial butterflies supposed to be hovering above the flowers.
Agnes has my confidence completely, always. I tell her all about the butcher and the wrongs he has heaped upon me. She thinks I couldn't have done otherwise than fight the butcher, while she shrinks and trembles at my having fought him.
They did just what they liked with me and wormed things out of me that I had no desire to tell, with a certainty I blush to think of, the more especially as, in my juvenile frankness, I took some credit to myself for being so confidential and felt that I was quite the patron of my two respectful entertainers.
As he walked up and down that part of the courtyard which was at the side of the house, with the stray rooks and jackdaws looking after him with their heads cocked slyly, as if they knew how much more knowing they were in worldly affairs than he.
Penitence, humiliation, shame, pride, love, and trustfulness. I see them all. And in them all, I see that horror of I don't know what.
As I think of them going up and down before those schoolroom windows, the doctor reading with his complacent smile, an occasional flourish of the manuscript, or grave motion of his head, and Mr. Dick listening and chained by interest, with his poor wits calmly wandering God knows where upon the wings of hard words, I think of it as one of the pleasantest things, in a quiet way, that I have ever seen.
My stool was such a tower of observation that as I watched him reading on again after this rapturous exclamation and following up the lines with his forefinger, I observed that his nostrils, which were thin and pointed, with sharp dints in them, had a singular and most uncomfortable way of expanding and contracting themselves, that they seemed to twinkle instead of his eyes, which hardly ever twinkled at all.
I imagined how the winds of winter would howl round it, how the cold rain would beat upon the windows' glass, how the moon would make ghosts on the walls of the empty rooms, watching their solitude all night.
I won't provoke my betters with knowledge, thank you.
Being by that time rather tired of this kind of life, and having received new provocation from the butcher, I throw the flower away, go out with the butcher, and gloriously defeat him.
Have you dined? Asked Mr. Wickfield with a motion of his hand towards the table.
As they did not see me, I thought it best, all things considered, not to see them.
And then he gave me his hand, which I didn't know what to do with, as it did nothing for itself.
I touch Miss Shepherd's glove and feel a thrill go up the right arm of my jacket and come out at my hair.
In a moment, the butcher lights 10,000 candles out of my left eyebrow.
I only know that I swim about in space with a blue angel in a state of blissful delirium until I find myself alone with her in a little room, resting on a sofa.
I suppose history never lies, does it? Said Mr. Dick with a gleam of hope.
But troubled as I was by my want of boyish skill, and of book learning too, I was made infinitely more uncomfortable by the consideration that, in what I did know, I was much farther removed from my companions than in what I did not.
But the blots were more expressive to me than the best composition, for they showed me that Peggotty had been crying all over the paper, and what could I have desired more?
A tender young cork, however, would have had no more chance against a pair of corkscrews, or a tender young tooth against a pair of dentists, or a little shuttlecock against two battledores than I had against Uriah and Mrs. Heep.
I found myself perpetually letting out something or other that I had no business of to let out, and seeing the effect of it in the twinkling of Uriah's dented nostrils. Well done. Successful symphony. Nicely done. That was definitely our best one yet. Well done, everybody.